Hello, everybody. This is Scott Dillon here, one of the architects in the Center of Excellence for SAP Cloud Platform. And of course, your host of this monthly series that we do called in the SAP Cloud Platform Garage. And today we're going to talk about a little bit about these sensors, or, they're not that big. And of course, now I'm struggling to get it out of the box here. But basically, this is a sensor from Particle. And of course, one of the questions that I sometimes get from folks when I go to visit them is, how would I take a sensor that we've purchased or that we already have in our environment, and how can we get that data? How do we capture the data? How can we, associate it with SAP type stuff? And so today we're going to talk about that, and we're going to show you how we put together an end-to-end scenario. So I'm just going to pop forward and show you who we've got on the phone with us today. We've got a couple of folks to make sure everything goes smoothly. We've got Giorgio Morani. What do you do, Giorgio, for SAP?
Hi, Scott. So I'm Global Product Manager for SAP Cloud Platform IoT service.
Awesome. And then we also have Derek Hafer. What do you do, Derek, for SAP?
Hi, everyone. I am a solution architect for SAP, covering all things SAP Cloud Platform.
Awesome. And we have Marco as well. Marco, can you say hello, or are you not able to say hello? If you're not, it's okay. I'll just tell everybody that you're one of the, yourself, like Giorgio. For those of you who don't know, SAP purchased an IoT solution. Was that about 2 years ago, Giorgio, I think?
Yeah, correct. It was 2 years ago. And so the acquisition of Plat1. So it was a company providing an IoT platform, so end-to-end platform for IoT to the market, going from device management and integration to application development.
Beautiful, beautiful. So we have two very well-educated, very knowledgeable on IoT, and of course, I always bring the smartest people with me. So this is really, really good. So, okay, so let's get going. So we always start the day with a quick poll, and just for all of you that are on the phone as well, we do have a group chat that you can use to kind of just say hi, tell us where you're from, all that kind of goodness. And we want to try to reserve the real product questions. If you can, put them in the Q&A pod, because that way we can answer a question, we can publish it out to everyone, and everyone sees the answer. But feel free to just take a shot at there. Is this your first time attending a garage session? We're going to give people 15 seconds to click that, and then I will move over. As well, just while we're getting going, we are still in the middle of finalizing the topics for 2019. We have settled on the January session, which will be mobile cards. So we'll show people how to use the mobile card application that's published on the App Store, how to hook that into maybe our workflow service to see how you can use that easily. And then in February, it looks like we'll cover the messaging service. And then based on the poll that you answered last time, I'm trying to figure out the cloud elements, the cloud connector stuff that we have for integration services, maybe for March, and then we'll see what follows that in April. So I'm working on that, so more to come. Okay, so we've got about 60% repeat, 40% new. So for those people that are repeaters, thank you very much for joining. This is great, and I know that we sent out about a half a dozen T-shirts or so last time, so it'd be really cool if you've got one. Let us know that you got it, or post something and tweet me or something like that. Let us know. And for those of you that are new, welcome. Very informal environment here. So just put your questions in the Q&A and we'll get them answered. All right. So moving on. So just before we start, there should be a URL. Please, somebody click it. Let me know if you see it pop up in a browser window. And this is just kind of the starting point, because one of the things that I often get is that people come to me and they say, Scott, I've got a simple scenario. I've got some sensors. The sensors generate some data. I'd like to build a really simple application that lets me see what that value is for the sensor. And so what you're looking at, hopefully in that window, and if someone could just post something in the group chat, let me know if you see the app actually pop up. It should be just come up with basically a small dashboard. But when we do that, so it was a UI5 application built using some technologies, and then we want to show you then today how to go from end to end. So what I'd like to do now is just get one more poll question, and then we're going to jump right in and give you all the background. So is this your question is, will this be your first introduction to IoT services? And this is just a little bit of background for Giorgio to have as he gets into telling you all about IoT. And then we're going to peel back the onion a little bit on how we did everything today. All right. Okay, so we've got 100% so far, Giorgio, in terms of what's there. And in fact, this doesn't surprise me because oftentimes, I'm going out and visiting customers and they're saying to me, yeah, we've heard of Fiori, we've heard of integration, we've heard a little bit about predictive. And I said, well, do you know we also have an IoT service? I'm like, really? So it's not entirely clear sometimes what we actually have. So we're going to dispel that today. So here we go. This is all you, my friend Giorgio, so take it away. We're going to do, as everybody knows on the phone, a 5-ish minute intro to the topic, and then we're going to peel back the onion on how this thing was put together.
Okay, thanks a lot, Scott. So as Scott mentioned, we'll start with a high-level introduction for practically everybody. So since it's the first time you've come to know about SAP Cloud Platform IoT service, and then we'll just dive into a bit more detail of the architecture and components and positioning of the IoT service. So first of all, what is SAP Cloud Platform Internet of Things service? It's a managed service on top of SAP Cloud Platform, so SAP's PaaS offering, and it enables customers and partners to develop, customize, and operate IoT business applications in the cloud. So we see IoT playing a key role as cornerstone for innovation, not just as a cloud platform service, but also an integral part of intelligent technologies enabling the intelligent enterprise, connecting physical assets to the business processes. So while the service provides a wide array of benefits, we can summarize some of them in these key capabilities. What does it actually do? So the IoT service for the Cloud Foundry environment connects devices to the SAP Cloud Platform to provide scalable ingestion to IoT data, and also device lifecycle management from onboarding to decommissioning. It also provides a secure connection to remote devices. So it's not just important to connect these devices, but have a secure connection using a broad variety of IoT protocols, with the possibility of extending these protocols and this coverage, making the platform what we call technology agnostic from, let's say, a bottom-up point of view where you have your technologies, your devices, and you put your hands in the ground and get them dirty with the technology, and also bring intelligence on the edge. And so this brings us to the other capability, making the IoT service an enabler of processor of sensor data at scale already at the edge or in the cloud. So be able to bring all the services and functionalities that we have on the cloud close to the edge, close to the devices for different scenarios that we'll probably mention. And make this data available for either other SAP Cloud Platform services or other applications. Moreover, the IoT service provides a multi-tenant environment and multi-tenant architecture, so it allows role-based access to device data through some of the APIs that we will also use live in this session. So as we can see here from the slide, there are some product innovations that we have focused on over the last 2 years since the delivery of the product on SAP Cloud Platform. Of course, we could not make it integrated and seamlessly integrated into SAP services for IoT. So for some examples, we'll just mention SAP IoT application enablement services for support of rapid development of IoT applications, and then also deep integration with digital supply chain solutions. Then we have also the support at the edge. So the support of edge services, and we will see and talk about which are the components that support edge services. So that, as we mentioned, it's all about edge processing, bringing that intelligence closer to the devices themselves. And so having these capabilities in IoT edge platform. And then, of course, we have continuous delivery of different features that we receive, of course, as feedback from our customers. We, as ourselves, bring in as expertise. So if we want to mention 3 key benefits, of course, is of the technology itself is that we have flexible deployment options for the gateway components and reaching the devices and assets that are relevant to you for your IoT projects. We have security fully embedded into this technology through certificate-based onboarding and authentication of devices. And then we offer a lot of also supporting kits to either extend or develop custom protocol adapters and also interceptors that we will talk about later on. Okay, so
awesome.
I think okay, thanks.
That's awesome, and I think you'll take a quick shot at this next slide. But I think what's really interesting about what you just said, and I know it's true for me, that when I started looking into the IoT service, there's a lot of things you just said that are so important and that probably at the moment maybe don't make a lot of sense to people on the phone, but they will. By the time we are finished this session, they will certainly make sense. So how about you walk us through, Giorgio, this one PowerPoint slide in its entirety, and then what we'll do is we're going to layer over the demo scenario that we're going to show people today, if that's okay.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so we'll make this, let's say, image simple for everybody. What I also like to stress is that, of course, being a managed service, a lot of the things that you see here are already taken care of by us. So we take out the burden of doing a lot of the boring stuff with IoT. So here we can split let's say, the slide into two sections, one on the left-hand side where you see devices and the IoT edge platform, which is outside, so it's on the edge, so anywhere between, let's say, the cloud and the edge itself, so outside of the SAP Cloud Platform. And then we have the main components and the core services on the SAP Cloud Platform environment. So let's start maybe on the left-hand side so we can have a flow from left to right. So first of all, we'll cover what we see here called IoT Edge Platform and the IoT Gateway Cloud. So these components are mostly have the same role. There will be some differences that we'll mention. So they look after all the aspects concerning management of devices, device integration, what we talked about, protocol normalization, and data acquisition from the deployed devices, and also edge computing. So ideally, when you're faced with some devices, as we will see today with some sensors, more complex devices, also industrial scenarios and more complex assets, these assets all talk with different languages and protocols. We as SAP and through IoT service, we cover a lot of these protocols and we give the possibility of creating adapters. So what we do is we practically give you the possibility of having a lingua franca, as we say, with the cloud component, so that you can bring the data from the edge, from the on-premise environment to the cloud. So depending upon the protocol and the connectivity requirements, it may either be hosted on cloud, as we see here on IoT Gateway Cloud. And if your devices are, let's call them smart enough to talk via REST or MQTT, then we have a secure connection to the Gateway Cloud. And this component is totally managed by us, so it scales and all the rest. Or it can be hosted at the edge. And here we're referring to that component called IoT Edge Platform. So this can be hosted on-premise, like on your servers, data centers. It can be hosted on small devices such as a Raspberry Pi, industrial PCs, or edge gateways, as long as you have some of the requirements for it to run on. And so this explains a variation in name. The other reasons why there's a variation into the two components is that certain protocols such as MQTT, for example, let's just take that one, can be hosted in the cloud due to no special networking requirements. However, certain edge connectivity scenarios absolutely require a distributed deployment. So let's just think about a production plant, a factory. So these edge scenarios may also include and are not limited to like physical buildings or moving cars and gateways. And so here it is important to connect and process the data in a distributed fashion, so locally, prior to forwarding it to the cloud and backend. And also to ensure that no data is lost due to intermittent connectivity and other reasons. So With the IoT Edge platform, there is further the ability to decide right at the edge and how data should be transmitted to the cloud. All these are features that are included within these components. And as mentioned, it can be extended with the SDK. So as you will be able to see, an IoT Edge platform covers a broader variety of protocols, which are more, let's say, legacy protocols, more industry-specific protocols like OPC UA, you have Modbus, and then we have also the coverage of new connectivity solutions. So it can be devices that we can connect to the cloud, but it can also be systems or even partner device clouds. The important thing is that we have one central ingestion point to the SAP Cloud Platform for your IoT relevant data. One other component running, so if we go back to the cloud part of the picture, we have the IoT Message Management Service. Just brief words on this component. This component handles all the incoming device data streams and device managed messages, and it forwards them to the IoT core service. Mainly you don't get to know about this component because it's all managed by us. But so you know, it provides publish and subscribe mechanism to have real time flowing in. Mainstay of the platform and the service is the core service. And so as a backend service, this takes care of all these aspects, including multi-tenancy, semantic data model, streaming analytics, data management, and big data interfacing, and management of applications and users. So this is the real brain of the IoT service. And it's a mediating layer between devices and applications. So the message there's also another service that we provide as part of the core service, which is called message processing service. And this provides different means of handling incoming messages. And depending on the actual use case, what you're able to do is messages might need to be either persisted on a database or forwarded to a message broker or an event stream processor or a document repository, so other systems. And we guarantee this level of flexibility within the core service and IoT service. So moving forward into the picture, and won't take too much time to describe this component, we see the IoT service cockpit. So the IoT service cockpit, just a few words, it's an admin console to make sure that everything that is being executed by IoT service is running smoothly. It's based on APIs that we expose as features and functionalities of IoT service, and we will look at it in the demo very thoroughly.
Absolutely. Okay, let me just ask a couple of questions. So we're going to pop over to the demo scenario in 2 seconds, but there's a couple of things you said in there that are of particular interest to me, so maybe they're interest to other people as well. So just on the left-hand side, you described, this direct connection that we have. So as an example, this little device that you can buy for like $35, $40 from particle.io, it's got the ability for me to put software on it, right? Which is a big difference maybe between some of the other devices. Let's pretend device 2 and 3 are not like this. So with device 1, I can program, push a piece of software to this, and then this device can be Wi-Fi enabled, it can be cell enabled, and it can also connect through HTTPS, MQTT directly to the platform. But as you mentioned, and I've seen and I've talked to customers this year that are in another category whereby we go to see them and they say, well, Scott, we've already got, device 2, device 3, device 4 on a shop floor, on a plant floor, and those cannot be modified and they're not Wi-Fi enabled. Is there anything you can do to help, bridge that gap to get us connectivity from the device to the edge and then let the edge connect securely to the cloud, right? And this is where we have this big distinction between potential scenarios, because a common question is, at least that I hear, is, well, which one do I use? And I said, well, there's no one that's preferred one over the other, but there are certainly advantages to some pros and cons, right? And so some of the pros immediately that I see with the edge is that if you're processing messages on the edge, and this is a big statement in and by itself, what it means to process a message on the edge. And the example that a lot of people use is that, if you're streaming in temperature, which we're going to show people today, and if the value is not changing, there's no need to send it to the cloud and use your cell data and occupy space in a database somewhere if the message is the same. So this could be an edge process where we just filter out the messages and just reduce the network traffic, right? That's an interesting but simple scenario that illustrates that use case perfectly, right?
Correct, correct.
Okay, and the second one that you mentioned that I'm keenly interested in is this message processing. So once data is flowing through, so I've got this little sensor and it's triggering, and in the case that we've got working today, I've got a message being sent, I think, every 60 seconds. So when this message comes through, if I decide that I want to loosely couple this architecture with maybe some other integration aspect in my environment, this message processing service allows me to invoke a HTTP webhook, essentially, right? I can just send a message to the webhook and it can take it and do whatever we want with it. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that is just one of the message processing service, which we call HTTP forwarding. Then, as mentioned, we can also store data directly in some database. So we're continuously extending the coverage of this message processing service. At the moment, we provide PostgreSQL message processing interface. We're soon going to integrate directly into HANA, so we will have the possibility of integrating to a HANA instance on cloud or on premise. And as mentioned, we're also providing Kafka message processing service so that you can also forward your IoT data into a Kafka instance that you have or that you would like to leverage. And let me just add that we've been using these services also to integrate into SAP's offering and to really create end-to-end scenarios for IoT. This also means that you can connect to other services like cloud platform integration, leverage other services like business rules, workflow, and so on. And of course, IoT application enablement and other services that we'll mention later on in our presentation.
Gotcha. Okay, that's awesome. And so one last thing before we show people the demo flow. Of course, the one thing that pops up we didn't really talk about, where does the data get stored at the moment? So we've got, again, temperature setting every minute. It's flowing into the IoT core service. Where does the data actually end up, and how would I get access to it? Because I'm sure there's, I've seen people on the attendee list. They work for development shops, consulting companies, that kind of stuff. So the question is, how would they be able to get access to that data and be able to build an app? Like I showed them with the URL that I sent them at the very beginning. How do they get access to that?
Okay, so they get access to RESTful APIs that we provide, and we also provide through an interactive catalog of these APIs that we will test out in the demonstration, which really enable to granularly take control and access data of the different entities, whether it's devices, the structure of devices, gateways managing the protocols, users, and security. And all this data is stored on through the message processing service on a Postgres database, or it's being forwarded through a data ingestion pipeline on like Kafka into other databases. For example, in IoT application enablement, we leverage their dynamic storage services to enable hot, warm, and cold storage for, let's say, aggregates, time series, and other sort of scenarios that they manage as enablement services for developing applications.
Okay, so you mentioned something there that we're going to leave to the end, but you did mention IoT application enablement. We're going to park that, and we're going to come back to it. So let's get into, we've got about 30 minutes or so left. Let's get into the demonstration that we want to walk people through and how to build this up. So I want to just give people the background here. So on my desk, in my office at the moment, on the top part of the screen, you can see I've got a Raspberry Pi running. And so this Raspberry Pi, again, it's $50 at your local hobby shop. If you're in Canada, you can pick one up for $50. And at the bottom, you can see that I have a small breadboard with the duplicate of this guy's brother, which is a Photon microcontroller. And attached to it, there's this little tiny white sensor here. And again, this is also available online. I think it's like $10. So all in all, I get about 60, 70 bucks worth of hardware to get this scenario going. And it's hobbyist hardware. It's not meant to be commercial grade, but it's still fun. And so this RTH03 has been wired up and basically with a few wires, and it's basically pulling data. And what we've decided to do is have that sensor, have that microcontroller push messages, and I've done it two ways. I've done it with MQTT in the past. Today I'm using REST to try something different. So it's making a REST call to this Raspberry Pi. And so we just don't have enough time in this session to show you how to configure completely the Raspberry Pi. But what I did is I went out to the service marketplace. You can download the IoT service for SAP Cloud Platform. It comes in the form of a zip file. You basically, and there's instructions there, very clear. You just install that gateway service, and you install it by protocol. So when you're installing the software, I installed it to support REST. So I've got a REST gateway running on that Raspberry Pi in my office. And as long as it's on the same network, this microcontroller is making the REST calls over to it. And so then that gateway piece is then communicating, and we'll show you this in a second when we pop into the cockpit. It's communicating to the message service. So that's the scenario that we're going to show today, and I think it's going to take us a while to walk through that. But then the question is, at least for me when I was getting started, so we have this little scenario, and the scenario or the sensor, that I bought is a humidity temperature sensor. So then the question is, does a solution support everything out of the box, or how do I configure or set up my scenario to be specific to this sensor? Because everybody has different sensors, different devices. We need to figure out how we do that. And so the good news is the IoT service comes with an extremely flexible data model that you'll have to get familiar with, just like I'm getting familiar with it myself. But let's walk through it just to have an idea. And you'll notice that you don't have to memorize them. There's no test at the end. But the letters that we've put in kind of a yellowish orange font, those are the names that we use in the cockpit, which you'll see shortly. But it's just good to know. So as an example, the gateway was a reference, or is a reference, to the Pi device that I've got on that previous screen. So I install that piece of Edge software, and you'll see it's called IoT Gateway REST Pi when we go into the cockpit, and it's sitting there listening for REST requests, essentially, again, a secure connection to the cloud outgoing. And it has a relationship to one or many devices. So in this particular case, a device, and we got to think about this because a device can have many sensors on it, and a sensor, in our case, we're using an RTH03, can capture many pieces of different data. So Gateway has one or more devices, and in this case, you're going to see we have a device called Garage 2018, but it's normally a physical device, and that is connected to one or many sensors. And so in this case, the sensor, you'll see in a second, is called RTH03 Garage, and a sensor is of a sensor type. So normally what happens is you would go into the system and you would create a generic sensor, and I should have did this, but I didn't. So I called it weather sensor as a generic sensor type, and then basically you create instances of that sensor type. So down at the bottom, you'll see RTH03 Garage as an instance of this weather sensor. So then we say, okay, so from there, what do we need to do? Well, I need to grab some data. So you create a capability. So the capability, I just called it weather. And for the weather, I want to capture two properties, a humidity and a temperature. And each of those, I believe, we recorded them as floats, and you can see the unit of measure, and one of them is Celsius, and the other one is a percentage. So these are all things, and we're going to show you that right now, but these are all things that you will have to configure. The good news is they're reusable. So if you created the sensor type RTH03, or in this case, weather sensor, and I go to create my second scenario, it's all reusable, and you'll see all the different data structures that are in there. So does that make sense, Giorgio, what I've said so far? I mean, if I've said something wrong, because you're the expert, tell me what I've said right and what I've said wrong here.
No, totally. You gave a good description. So what I would like to stress is, of course, after successful onboarding of a device, which is representing the physical object, and this is enabled to send or receive messages. So once we create the structure and we define the capabilities, these can both be, let's say, measures and or commands if we're able to interact with those devices. So we have a bidirectional connection with the field.
Right, and that's a really important point that you make there, because some people think, oh, does your software support, sending stuff to the device? And of course, the response for me always is, well, we can send stuff to it, provided they're willing to receive it. So the device in question needs to be able to take something back and work with that, right? So in the case of this guy, that's actually my next little challenge for myself, maybe over the holidays, to be able to send a command back to it. I don't know, maybe turn on an LED light or turn a motor or something like that. But that's my next little scenario, using a command property instead of a measure, as you pointed out. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. Somebody please let me know once you see my screen. Maybe if Carrie, you can send me a message to let me know that it's coming through and across okay. Do you see my screen in your audience view there, Giorgio?
Yes, I do, Scott.
Perfect. So we want to basically show folks now, we want to bring them into the cockpit and show them how we basically created this scenario. So you want to give a quick introduction to the cockpit that we see before us here?
Okay, sure. So as we mentioned during the introduction of the architecture, the cockpit is the user interface that the admin user of the IoT service, so the technical service, has to manage users, resources, and entities tied to the IoT service. What we can see from the login page is that we will log in as a tenant of the IoT service, maybe as administrator this time, but we already provide some very useful, let's say, information sources at the bottom of the page. As mentioned, we already have the interactive catalog of the device management APIs that we can look at and test. We have, of course, the main source of truth, which is our documentation. It's very rich documentation, which not only goes and describes what the components are in very technical details, but it also provides very good tutorials to start you off on the usage of the IoT service, and gives you also useful links to download resources. Then we have community, that's always useful. And then the starter kit. So the starter kit is actually a GitHub repository where we already provide sample code and able to kind of jumpstart you off and also automate some of the processes that you might have to do manually, like mass onboarding, and this is available in different languages. So you will see some Python, Java, and so on. So very useful as well in implementing your IoT project. So why don't we just log in, Scott?
Absolutely, great idea. All right. So it looks like I'm prompted right away with my tenants.
So we've already mentioned that we have a multi-tenant enabled environment with granular roles. So we have a hierarchy of roles, and you can kind of manage this to enable users, administrators. And what changes is the level of grants to access and control certain or other types of information, and also be able to interact with the entities that you're actually connecting to the IoT service. So as I can see here, your role is administrator. So you should be able to do whatever you want here. So onboard devices, which we have done, and also be able to interact and create entities.
Awesome. Okay, I'm just going to click and log into that tenant. And then from here, what do we have here on the left-hand side?
Okay, so as we can see, it's already kind of a summary of what the cockpit can provide you with. So we're able to manage members. So you're able to add users and members. You're able to actually have the device management. So we give you all those capabilities to manage devices, sensors, sensor types, and capabilities. So all those components that make up your physical objects and your assets. Let me just say that maybe this is something that we didn't mention before, but what we've done in creating this device model is we have abstracted very technical information and data into future-proof information, which can then be leveraged by many applications. So it might seem, let's say, trivial or given as a fact, but here, once you're interfacing with industrial devices and PCs or systems, or I don't know, your LoRa sensor network and so on. Here we're already kind of taking care of a lot of the hard stuff you have in implementing your IoT projects.
Okay. All right. So let's start. What I want to show people, what I'm going to make sure we get through in the next 10 minutes or so, is I want to make sure that people understand exactly how I configured the working scenario that we have. So I want to start by just kind of giving a quick introduction to this gateway piece, because in my mind, when I went to set up this scenario, step one, for me, because I knew I wanted to use the edge processing, because I think that one it's just interesting to me, and the value that it can bring in different scenarios. So number one, I had to, as I mentioned, download that software package from the service marketplace, install it, and I have installed it, just so people know on the phone, I've installed it both on my laptop. No problem. I've had multiple instances running, one for REST, one for MQTT, all at the same time. And today, the one that I've got up and running is this REST Pi. And so you can see this REST Pi, it has an ID, and you can clearly see it's indicated here, the Edge platform. But at the same time, Giorgio, we have some other ones here, like we have this MQTT network and REST network. What are those two for?
Okay, so as we mentioned before, looking at the architecture, these are our IoT Gateway Cloud components. So these are the ingestion points that you can send data to, and we already offer a secure link to these devices that talk with these languages. So these are managed by us. So as you can see, they're all online, and you're able to interact with the gateway component.
Connect, you have a device, you can either write something, or it's already enabled, as an example, out of the box to MQTT, point it at the MQTT service, and away you go, data starts streaming in, right?
Yeah, you have to ensure you have a secure, so you have to download certificates and be able to then onboard the devices and ingest the data.
Gotcha.
So just another comment here. So we see that we have MQTT or REST, but let's just think that we were leveraging the OPC UA Edge platform. And usually this would show up here. One other thing is that here we have a lot of edge platforms. Let's just say that you have a distributed scenario, and you have you're the, let's say, company managing different oil rigs or factories that are distributed worldwide or to the country. You want to be able to distribute all these gateway components. And what you're able to do through these gateway components is you're also able to kind of centralize the control and be able to manage whatever is running on top of these gateways and talking with these gateways. But at the same time, you can keep an identity. So let's just say that you have a factory for, let's say, paint job of your cars. Depending on the specific use case, you can then customize how the data ingestion is being done through these gateway components. Because, you know, let's just take environmental factors. Humidity might require less paint or more paint on, let's say, a car in one region rather than another. So you're really able to distribute intelligence and manage this centrally from your cockpit.
Right. But the question is, I'm going to click on it because that's the what, and then the question is the how. And so when I click on it, one of the things that you and I were talking about yesterday is we have this notion of bundle management. So to your point, I've now just kind of selected a gateway in a particular region. And as part of your introduction, you kind of gave a quick description about these interceptors, which my description is pretty simple. It's some custom code written using the SDK that I can create this interceptor format. And then by using this deploy OSGI bundle, I can now take that interceptor and push it to a very specific gateway. So if I wanted to do processing, to your point, in that region that was specific to that gateway, this is how I would do that. Is that correct?
It's correct. So what we see is that the gateway or the gateway cloud, or moreover the edge platform, also functions as a secure runtime environment for edge services. Okay, so that look also after the lifecycle management of these services and protocol adapters. So for example, an interceptor, you would then be deployed and managed through the central cockpit here.
Awesome. And the same thing I see like down below, because, today it's pretty simple. I can walk into my office and I can grab that Pi, I can shut it down, I can log into it. But if I didn't have easy access, we also have the ability here to download the configuration or show the configuration that's currently running on the Pi. And if I needed to, I could basically deploy something new, a new configuration over there. I don't know, let's say the polling interval changes or whatever the case may be. I could change it and I could push it from here over to that Pi and never have to go to that location, right?
Correct.
Okay, that's cool. So let's get out of here for a second. So let's go back because I think we need to start now because I want to show people kind of the data flowing in here. So step number one, I've determined as part of this really simple scenario, I want to capture temperature and humidity. So for everybody on the phone, the first thing that I did is I came in here, hit the plus sign, and then what I did was I created, and I apologize, this is a demo system, so there's some things are repeated in here, so don't blame me for that. But here we have one that I created. So it's weather with a lowercase w, and it's a capability. So just remember back to that data model that we showed you. I'm creating a capability now, and when I click it, you can see this capability has two properties: a temperature, a humidity, a data type, and then a unit of measure. Okay, so this is step number one. We need to get our properties created that we want to capture in some way, shape, or form. And you will notice that sometimes out of the box, there are some basic capabilities provided. But I think in general, you'll be starting from scratch to kind of build out your own scenario. And then also, if you remember back to that diagram, there is a sensor type. So you can see I've got a capability called weather, and now it's been associated with this sensor type called weather sensor. So I just click on weather sensor, I can see weather sensor, and there's a capability here called weather. The other thing I will mention just to folks, if they leave this call and they start digging in, one of the things that was confusing for me, Giorgio, when I started playing around is that we do have this big, long ID number. There's no chance of ever remembering that one, but we also had this alternate ID, and it wasn't clear to me why we would provide that. Do you want to just shed a little bit of light on that?
Yeah, of course. As we mentioned, once we create all these entities, you want to give it a unique identity. And so you can either define an alternate ID, which already gives you a unique identifier of the specific entity. It could already be a model name or serial number, whatever makes sense for you. And it gives you the possibility of then relating back to that unique identifier to streamline the onboarding of these entities and, let's say, correlating them with devices. So, we went through the complicated slide of device model, but in the end, if you think about it, you only need to go through this once. And if you have more weather stations or garage sensors, then you can just rely on whatever you already developed, and also use our APIs to automatically onboard and create these models and devices.
Right, and exactly. So I guess for me, the other thing that we were talking about yesterday is that you might show up, or we might show up at a customer, and the customer might say, hey, Scott, we've already got 1,000 devices here, and we've already given them, a naming structure that's specific to our company. So we could take their naming convention and we could populate it in here as opposed to the ID field, which is generated by us. So option one,
correct,
let the system generate the alternate ID. We'll generate it for you and we'll populate it. Or option number two, you can put your own in there. Okay, so this is good. So we've got so far we had to do the capability. That's done. Two properties. We've got a sensor type. Now we need to create a sensor. So I click on the sensors tab. Of course, I've got one created here. It is RTH03 Garage. And so this is the sensor that I created. And you can see over here on the right-hand side, it has the weather sensor type. So I'll just click on that one. And then you can see, again, it references the capability. We have the sensor type here. And then by default, it's logged us in and it showed us that we are now in this Garage 2008 device. And so if I just pop back here for a second, if I click on devices, I just want to show you that there are a lot of devices here. So I've got a few that are at play, and the Garage 2018 is the device that I created for today. And so again, just starting from the bottom up, capability, sensor type, creating a sensor, which you see here, and then one or more sensors can be associated with a device. So if you think about, again, the little Proton microcontroller that I have, it's associated with one sensor, in this case, the RTH03, but that RTH03 could potentially be consuming many measures. So, which is why the model has to be flexible enough to accommodate. So what we can see here, RTH03, if I select the data visualization at the bottom, you can see there's two. And then I'm going to pick the RTH03 garage, and I'll just pick on the graphical view here. Scroll down a little bit, and I'll just filter the time out a bit. So you can see 13:45, that's just a little bit less than 40 or 50, 60 seconds ago. And I've got this, I think this line here is the humidity, this one's the temperature. And if we had multiple properties, you know, I can just deselect or select. But the idea here is this is not, you know, this is the admin console. So the admin console is exactly that. It's a place where you can go just to make sure that things are working okay. It's not meant for you to be a place to slice and dice the data. Just know that data's coming in. And so we do see that. Did I miss anything there, Giorgio?
No, I guess you didn't. So probably what we missed, having already done the creation of the device, is that you've already got the possibility of extending the device model with some custom information that you can already attach to the model, like as if there were like sticky notes. So these are called custom properties, which you do not see here. But for example, you can bring this additional data with you through the IoT flow. Let's just say it's
so I didn't add any, but data. I guess we do it right here, I guess, right? We would do it by adding it here. Okay, cool.
What we also didn't show is that, of course, we have generated a certificate and we have secured the connection with that specific device.
Exactly. So that's all. So that's just to summarize that, and then we'll show people how to get access to the data with some of the APIs. So we've got I think it's a law of 7 that I got to repeat it. So we've got at the very basic, at the very beginning, number 1, download and install the Edge component and install it for the protocol that you're interested in connecting with. And there's a really nice install guide that comes with that. It walks you through. It took me maybe just under an hour to install that gateway software. Number 2, then basically create your data model. And your data model is then, you know, your capability, what data do I need, create a sensor type, create your sensor, and then associate it with the devices in question. So then once you have your data model in place, then you can start sending these REST calls against the gateway, and it'll just flow through and they be accepted here. I mean, that's, so in general, like, you know, end to end, took me about a day just to kind of get the pieces in place, but it wasn't difficult. The only other thing I would mention is, can you talk just briefly, because we've got a few things I have to show in the last 10 minutes, this whole notion of automatic onboarding, because we went through today creating everything kind of from scratch. How does an auto onboarding scenario work?
Okay, so practically the auto onboarding is managed by the Edge platform itself, so that when devices that have been certified to talk with that Edge platform and are pointing to the Edge platform are automatically onboarded, and the device model that is created is then automatically created on the cockpit itself.
Right. Okay.
We have also auto onboarding mechanisms that are top-down driven. So for our customers to know that might already know some of the other offerings and have utilized SAP solutions, like maybe coming from the digital supply chain, like Asset Intelligence Network or Predictive Maintenance Service. We have leveraged all these services and APIs that we've talked about and mentioned to really have an end-to-end automatic onboarding of devices and kind of correlating this with the equipment models so that the users don't have to do it themselves.
Gotcha. So that's good. So this makes it a lot, I guess, quicker and more efficient. If you happen to have hundreds of devices, you wouldn't want to be maybe setting up and creating all the devices yourself, right, could really facilitate that task. So just quickly, on this UI5 application that people were able to log into earlier, you can see that I've got these two tiles, and I was just playing with the microchart bar here to kind of display the same information, but I've got two tiles that are basically being connected to the IoT service. So of course, when people come to me and say, well, Scott, look, I just want to have a, one or two tiles, a simple dashboard that shows the value of some of my sensors, the question then becomes, okay, now I've got device, gateway feeding the IoT service platform. How do I get access to that data so that I can display this value just like that? How would I go about doing that? So I want to have a quick conversation around the API. So can you show us how to get there?
Yeah, sure. If you go to the bottom left hand to useful links, we can access the device management APIs.
Okay. All right.
And so once we authorize ourselves, so we log on with our same credentials as we use for the cockpit.
Okay.
We're then able to test and try out the APIs themselves.
All right, so as an example, I see one here for devices, right? So I see devices, and this one tells me the endpoint returns a list of devices. That seems pretty simple. I can just say try out and execute. All right. So if I do a search here for RTH, you can see that I've got different RTH devices that I've been playing with. Yep. Okay.
Correct.
So this is good. So in the case of the app that I wanted to build, going back, I think 2 days ago, I was kind of in here poking around, and you directed me to another one, which was, I think it was still devices, but I wanted to get the data off, right?
Yeah.
And
so
that was measures, I think.
Correct. So get device measures. This is just an example. So here you're already able to try out and access the measures. So if you just click try out, we have to feed it some further requirements because we want to get the measures maybe not from all the devices, but from a specific device like we're doing here. So the device ID, if we recall what we had in the cockpit, is 301, if I recall correctly.
Let's just go back and show people so they'll know how to do that. So I go back to devices. I'm going to scroll down. Garage 2018 was my device. And this ID, not to be confused with the alternate ID, will be the one that we will put in that API call, right? So we'll go back.
Correct.
We'll grab the 301. And we'll do the top 20. And we'll execute that.
I think you typed in 302.
Yeah. Too fast. I was too fast on that. Okay, 301. And then, yep, lo and behold, I've got temperature, humidity, temperature, humidity. Yep. So I've got all my properties now, all my measures, excuse me, all the values for the measures coming back with a really simple API call. So basically what I did once, Giorgio pointed me at that, I certainly don't propose to be a UI5 expert, but making a straight up REST call, not that hard to do, and just filtering through some of the results, I was able to create that very simple test IoT app in a couple of hours. So here's now the question that I want to return to Giorgio, because now we've shown people, or we've given people the idea behind the architecture, device, edge, IoT service, some of the message processing, showing them how to use an API, kind of giving an impression of how that could be done. But oftentimes, I had a customer come to me, they wanted to do exactly this. So this was a requirement to build, a 1 or 2 tile application that was showing a sensor value. Clearly this is possible with the IoT service. However, to me, this is the tip, this is the starting point, because we've gone through some basic functionality, but we also have IoT application enablement, right? And so if somebody wanted to know the difference just quickly, when would I start to think about looking at IoT application enablement versus the IoT service that we just showed them?
Okay, so of course we give the technical foundation, so the technical service to take care of the management of the devices. But if you think about it, and we think about the billions of connected devices that are being forecast by analysts that need to be connected, for each device, imagine how many applications you need to build. And you cannot, let's say, have the time to sit down and code an application for each device over and over, but you want to have a set of tools that enable you to rapidly develop these applications. Maybe it's for your engineering team, maybe it's for your plant manager or your business team. So you have different types of insights that you need. So for example, let me share my screen.
Sure. We've got 3 minutes left, so you need to be quick, Giorgio.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So why would you use IoT application enablement? First of all, you would need application enablement to rapidly build these applications using all the underlying services that we mentioned. So application enablement enables the ingest of data into different types of storage that we mentioned, cold, warm, and hot storage, depending on what you want to do and act upon the data. It also provides best-of-breed business services, okay, to rapidly build IoT applications, and also gives reusable application services like, for example, ping hierarchies, business partner authorization. These are all building blocks that come with application enablement. And furthermore, as we're seeing in the dashboard, I suppose, can you confirm that you can see the dashboard in front of me?
Yep.
Yeah, so this is just an easy example of a dashboard that we have built just in a few minutes. Using the rapid application development environment provided by application enablement on Web IDE. So what we have here is a web-based environment where you can drag and drop IoT UI5 controls. So it's like charts, thing lists. As you can see, you have maps. And you can really have like your monitoring dashboards, and based on what you want to do, you can complicate it or, of course, make it easy. As if that weren't enough, application enablement already provides templates and wizard-based approach so that you can just click through the creation. And what you have to do is you bind this, let's say, graphical interface to existing like APIs, like we've seen. Very easy, click on a button, execute, and all these applications will be available on any sort of, let's say, apparatus. So like mobile, tablets, PCs, laptops, and so on.
Okay, so I need to stop you there because we want to respect people's time and stop in like 2 minutes. So number one, I'm going to put the poll question up. So if you could stop sharing, I'm going to put the poll question up so people can see it, number one. Number two, so one of the things I heard you say was, you know, in my case, it was very much a programmatic effort to build that application, sitting down, writing some code, using UI5. When you switch over to application enablement, things like the storage of data in warm storage or hot storage, that's kind of like a service. Some of the time series stuff, that's like a service. And as well, SAP has built out some additional Web IDE templates that are part of the IoT and application enablement that enables you to build an app like that much faster, right? That's kind of like two or three things that would kind of direct you down there. So folks, number one, thank you for coming. This is our last Garage series for this year. We put a poll question up because, as you know, I don't reach out to anybody on these sessions unless you want to speak with me. So we have a poll up that you can basically just say, yeah, we'd like to speak with SAP further on that. Myself and or Giorgio, we'd be happy to have a chat with you after the fact. No problem there. I will tell you that I just summarized by saying with the session that's in January, we will be doing the mobile cards. That's number one. And at the same time, in parallel to all this, we're currently working on the next version of our technical academies for next year. And IoT will definitely be part of that, potentially setting up exactly this scenario with an edge component. We'll be covering the mobile development kit, which we did last time. We'll also do some workflow. We'll also do the messaging service. And the messaging service, hopefully we will cover that one either February or March. and we're going to either February, March, and the other one that we'll cover will be the cloud connectors. So I hope everybody's been having they enjoyed the session today, number one, so thank you for attending. If you have any comments, any questions, the best way to reach me is always either through an email, scott.dillon@sap.com, or you can tweet me, say you had a good time in the garage today. Make sure we get lots of people attending going forward. And at the moment, we've got one session lined up for every month in 2019. So thank you very much, Giorgio. Thanks very much, Team SAP, everybody handling the questions. And if there's questions we didn't get to, we will follow up with an email. Thanks and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye. Ciao.
See you, Giorgio. And we're done. We are off the air. Well done, Giorgio.
All right, good job, everyone.
Well done, Scott.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
That's awesome. I think it went pretty well. There was no major glitches, and yeah, we actually ended on time this time. We weren't right up to the minute, although pretty close, but I think it was pretty good. And we still got some thank you and stuff coming in on the chat, but I think it went well. How many questions did we get in there? Quite a few.